You can't be serious. Hi, everyone. Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. Everybody knows why we are here. Kanye West, formerly Kanye West, currently Ye, he has apologized. He has given yet another formal public apology, taking out an advertisement in the Wall Street Journal, of all places, to do this. As some of you may know, his new album Bully is said to be on the way. As you guys, I'm sure you're aware, Ye does have this tendency to promise projects, push them back, disappear them, go in different directions, do something else. Who really truly knows if Bully is ever really going to come out? We were supposed to get Vultures 3. And, that's not to say he'll never make another record again. We could switch to a different album entirely. But as of right now, what many fans are saying is that Bully is the album to look out for. Presumably there is some kind of release, something around the corner. Could this continuation of the apology tour be an extension of wanting to essentially, keep people on his good side, stay in people's good graces, because he does have something to release coming down the pipe? And there's just been, obviously, over the past couple of years of anti-Semitism, crazy, unhinged right-wing rhetoric, a lot of distrust going Ye's way, understandably. What's chat saying right now? It's dropping on Friday. I don't know. We'll just have to see, honestly. Like, people tell me all the time, yeah, the new Kanye is dropping immediately, dropping tomorrow, dropping here, dropping there, and then it doesn't happen. I mean, eventually a drop does occur, but 9 times out of 10, when people say Kanye is about to drop something, he doesn't. But it could happen, not entirely ruling it out. I'm just saying there's a lot of reason to just not really hold out hope for promised release dates with Kanye. It just comes out when it comes out, for the most part. Anyway, I thought, while we are here together with additional commentary from you guys, we would look over Ye's apology here and see exactly what he had to say. Because, look, the last time we had a discussion around this, it was when he dropped that video of him hanging out with that rabbi and having a discussion with him. Given that we have seen apologies for this type of behavior before from Kanye, only for him, Ye, for him to turn around and basically do the same thing again, but worse in a lot of cases. This has caused many to look at this apology and just kind of shrug and think, like, so what? He's done this before. We've heard this before. Is this going to be any different? We will just have to see. I will say, in Ye's defense, in the wake of, unless chat can remind me here, again, someone in chat just said it's a cycle. And there's definitely, like, patterns here to be observed. But can anyone in chat remind me? Because since his last apology, since that video apology I just mentioned, has there been a crash out? I don't know if there's been a crash out since then. Has there been a crash out? I don't think there's been a crash out since then. And look, I'm not coming on here to say, okay, so people are saying no. Look, here's the thing. Kanye, over the course of his career, I'm not saying he's always been like this. He's always espoused this. He's always believed this, the hateful things that we've been seeing him say over the past couple of years. I'm not saying that, but he has always been someone who is unhinged to some degree, has had a difficult time, very difficult time filtering himself, has not always had the best or most constructive internal thoughts, that when they do get out there into the world, they don't always reflect positively upon him. However, the state of his career has not always been this bad. I do, sort of like credit that to him falling down a lot of very weird ideological rabbit holes. But more importantly, I credit that to him kind of having little to no self-control and also rejecting the help and the influence of everyone around him who might have his better interests at heart. Be that his ex, Kim Kardashian, who, regardless of how you feel about her, seemed to the best that she could, try to support him through his many public outbursts and, sort of like frame them in a way that didn't make him come across as so manic and so out of control. And who knows who else on his team, who he had been working with for years, may have distanced themselves in the wake of everything he's been saying. There very clearly was a point in recent years in his career where there was really nobody standing between him and whatever camera or microphone he could get in front of to say the most wild, unhinged stuff. And that has not always been the state of his career. That has not always been the state of his PR. He's had his outbursts in the past, but never has Kanye had completely unfiltered access to just saying whatever he has wanted to immediately when he's felt it, just boom, like that. And I think due to social media and due to maybe a pushing away of people around him who've might have been a bit of a stopgap in the past, we've just been seeing worse and worse and worse and worse outbursts. But with that being said, it's been a while since he's had that kind of interaction with the internet. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe he's listening to others. Maybe he's gaining a bit of self-control. Somebody in chat just said he was off the nitrous because there were allegations of him getting potentially illegal access to nitrous through a dentist. And, not to make light of any of this because it's very unfortunate, it's very sad, who, was basically allowing him to get access to this stuff. And he was allegedly abusing it. So, given that it's been a while since he's had an outburst or, any kind of like the worst, things have definitely not gone downhill since the worst we've seen from him so far. We'll say that, and he has not done a 180 since his last apology. And it's been a minute since then. So one would hope maybe we are on a positive path forward. So with that being said, 2 apologies in a row, the second one here being text and seeming to be more thorough, is potentially a positive sign. I don't know. We can cross our fingers as we look through this and see what Ye is saying here. So without any further ado, let's read this. Shout out to Philip Lewis, who's a very cool guy, very based guy, very awesome guy. If you come across Phil Lewis on whatever social media platform you see Phil Lewis on, be it Twitter, be it a short form platform, anything like that, follow Phil Lewis. Phil Lewis is a cool guy. Based Phil Lewis. Shout out to Phil Lewis. Always a good guy, that Phil Lewis. So again, this is not just an editorial and opinion piece. This is a paid advertisement in the Wall Street Journal. So money was paid to post this, and the Wall Street Journal saw fit to post this. 25 years ago, I was in a car accident that broke my jaw and caused injury to the right frontal lobe of my brain. At the time, the focus was on the visible damage, the fracture, the swelling, and the immediate physical trauma. The deeper injury, the one inside of my skull, went unnoticed. Comprehensive scans were not done. Neurological exams were limited, and the possibility of a frontal lobe injury was never raised. It wasn't properly diagnosed until 2023. That medical oversight caused serious damage to my mental health and led to my bipolar type 1 diagnosis. That's the claim. I personally don't know enough about bipolar or the science of brain injuries to say whether or not bipolar. I mean, I've known people who are bipolar from, my experience with them. Their, condition was not caused by an injury in a car crash. So I don't know enough about the history of that to sort of confirm the potential of that happening. But again, this is his claim. Bipolar disorder comes with its own defensive system, denial. When you're manic, you don't think you're sick. You think everyone else is overreacting. You feel like you're seeing the world more clearly than ever, when in reality, you're losing your grip entirely. Again, not a bipolar expert, but having known and dealt with people who are bipolar, I can say this much feels true from personal anecdotal experience. Psychiatrist here, that's just deflecting. Grain of salt. I don't know cannot confirm that this person is a psychiatrist, but there's not many people in my chat usually claiming to be psychologists or psychiatrists for that matter, but we'll continue on. Once people label you as crazy, You feel as if you cannot contribute anything meaningful to the world. It's easy for people to joke and laugh it off, when in fact this is very serious, debilitating. It's a very serious, debilitating disease you can die from. According to the World Health Organization and Cambridge University, people with bipolar disorder have a life expectancy that is shortened by 10 to 15 years on average, and a 2 to 3 higher all-cause mortality rate than the general population. This is on par with severe heart disease, diabetes, type 1, HIV, cancer, all lethal and fatal if left untreated. Obviously, I'm jumping in here again before I read further, but like, I mean, look, there are people on the internet who are very savage and callous and uncaring and nasty and cruel and will laugh and will make a joke out of anything. Okay, that much is true. But like, a majority of the most serious and concerned of us, and I would count myself among them. I would imagine some who were very close to Kanye, people whose livelihoods, literally depended on Ye being a stable, consistent, successful artist who was not shooting his own career in the foot. I remember the very loud chorus of people who were commenting on this in the media, in the music space. Even many of his biggest fans were encouraging him to take this seriously, I don't recall the vast majority of people just treating this as a joke. In fact, I personally, when I reviewed the Ye album, I thought some points of the record were pretty interesting and brave in terms of how he approached his own feelings around bipolar. And that wasn't an album everybody liked, obviously. People had their own preferences and reasons for not liking it. At least from what I recall, a great deal of people, at least a significant amount of people, people who were worth taking seriously, were taking this condition that Kanye was saying he had very seriously, and were sort of disheartened by the fact that he very clearly wasn't doing what he needed to do in order to keep it treated. The scariest thing about this disorder is how persuasive it is when it tells you you don't need help. It makes you blind, but convinced you have insight. You feel powerful, certain, and unstoppable. I lost touch with reality. This is kind of the quote everybody is kind of using, talking about it. I lost touch with reality, which honestly is more of an admission, is honestly one of the realest things he said over the past couple of years. It's one of the realest things he said over the past couple of years. He literally, regardless of how you feel about this apology so far, that's like the realest he's been in quite a while. It's still debatable as to whether or not he's fully gained it back, given his condition and how he describes it. It's most likely going to be something he struggles with to some degree or another from here forward, but still, that's a pretty real admission, regardless of what his motivations are, which we'll sort of talk about after we're done reading this. Or motivations potentially could be. Things got worse the longer I ignored the problem. I said and did things I deeply regret. Some of the people I love the most, I treated the worst. You endured fear, confusion, humiliation, and exhaustion of trying to love someone who was, at times, unrecognizable. Looking back, I became detached from my true self. In fact, that fractured state, I gravitated toward the most destructive symbol I could find, the swastika, and even sold t-shirts bearing it. One of the difficult aspects of having bipolar type 1 is the disconnected moments, many of which I still cannot recall, that led to poor judgment and reckless behavior that oftentimes feels like an out-of-body experience. I regret and am deeply mortified by my actions in that state, and am committed to accountability, treatment, and meaningful change. It does not excuse what I did. I'm not a Nazi or an anti-Semite. I love Jewish people. All right. I will echo some sentiments I have read that, like, this statement seems very much not Kanye and written by somebody else. There have been allegations of people saying, oh, this feels like AI wrote it and da-da-da-da-da. Regardless of all of that, whether or not it was penned by somebody else or something else, I still think that's a positive sign. I still think that's a good thing. I don't read that as fakeness necessarily, because in the past, for Kanye to be able to even exhibit a bit of what seemed like stability, I mean, he had to be able to pass control, a willingness of control over to other people to represent him in ways that maybe he couldn't at certain times. And for him to be able to relinquish enough control to put out a statement like this that is measured and is sensible. Again, we can debate the motivations going into it, but again, the surface level reads as very sensible, much more sensible than Kanye, Ye, has been willing to come across in most contexts, be it in an interview, be it in a random video, be it in a tweet, whatever. It says something that, despite the fact that maybe to some degree there's still a voice in his head, an opinion, a point of view, something that he is struggling with that's telling him to feed further into these conspiratorial ideas and so on and so forth. He's clearly working against that at this point. And again, is willing to put out something that is measured and is self-critical of his behavior. Let's read further. To the Black community, which held me down through all the highs and lows and the darkest of times, the Black community is unequivocally the foundation of who I am. I am so sorry to have let you down. I love us. Okay, he goes further into sort of describing the situation, but, I feel like that needs further commentary. However, obviously take with a grain of salt anything I say, because I'm a white guy. But with that being said, I do think, it is something there for him to have at least kind of sidebarred and said that. Even though maybe in a lot of respects, this should be like potentially a main focus in this apology or in another conversation, because for years there have been a lot of longtime hip hop fans who have been very upset with Kanye for the way that certain statements and perspectives have just sat out there unchecked, unmitigated, uncontrolled, like years and years ago, his statement about slavery being a choice. And that's not the only questionable statement he's ever made when it's come to, the way he feels about the Black community, or just the way that African Americans have to sort of like suffer through the indignities of American politics and the racial inequity of the system that we live under, which, I mean, we're seeing the realities of every day as there are masked thugs roving the streets, killing people for protesting and filming them, and so on and so forth. What a lot of people are up in arms about now and angry about now is a reality that Black Americans have had to suffer for decades. I mean, Minnesota is also where George Floyd was killed. Minnesota was also where Philando Castile was killed. I'll admit my memory here is not great. I don't know if Kanye ever said anything out of pocket about George Floyd. Maybe chat remembers. I don't recall that being the case. But there have been other statements out there that, again, longtime fans, some people are saying he did, again, would need confirmation on that. There are a lot of Black fans, longtime hardcore fans, hip hop fans who, have been looking at him sideways ever since statements like that, way before everything he was doing with regards to the swastika, so on and so forth. Didn't he donate to George Floyd's family? Yeah. The thing is, I'm not fully remembering or recalling anything that was purely negative vis-a-vis Kanye with George Floyd. I even remember him sort of like, wasn't he out and about for like a Black Lives Matter protest and everything? He said on Drink Champs, look, here's the thing. During the points at which Kanye was dealing with a lot of this, truth be told, there probably wasn't any one significant political issue, social issue that he was 100% sensible on, even if there were moments where he was like, kind of like making the right choices or saying the correct things. But with that being said, in early 2025, I fell into a 4-month manic episode of psychotic, paranoid, and impulsive behavior that destroyed my life. As the situation became increasingly unsustainable, There were times I didn't want to be here anymore. Having bipolar disorder is not a state of constant mental illness. When you go into the manic episode, you are ill at that point. When you are not in an episode, you are completely quote unquote normal. And that's when the wreckage from the illness hits the hardest. Hitting rock bottom a few months ago, my wife encouraged me to finally get help. I have found comfort in Reddit forums of all places. Different people speak of being in manic or depressive episodes of a similar nature. I read their stories and realized that I was not alone. Okay, interesting that, I mean, Kanye, pretty online guy historically. The idea that he would be getting some kind of like inspiration from a Reddit thread is not really all that surprising, honestly. I mean, it's a very clean, put together statement that looks like it's been carefully edited and assembled, even if like, all the logic doesn't flow. It's like a very well assembled statement. I read their stories and realized that I was not alone. It's not just me who ruins their entire life once a year despite taking meds every day and being told by the so called best doctors in the world that I am not bipolar, but merely experiencing symptoms of autism. Has he not been formally diagnosed as being bipolar? Wasn't he diagnosed in UCLA? Yeah, I mean, the narrative around whether or not he has been diagnosed has been confusing. Like the water's definitely been muddied a bit around that topic. I mean, regardless of what the truth is or what the diagnosis is, Kanye has definitely not been acting in a way I think any rational person would act. It's been, and look, obviously there have been a lot of like crazy psychotic right wingers who have been quick to kind of like take advantage of the fact that Kanye has been willing to say and express certain radical, racist, extreme ideologies. But even the worst among these people behave in fashions that are more logical and more self-preservationist than Kanye has been acting over the past couple of years. So, not to say that anybody who he's been, having kind of endorse these views or support him on the back end, like, I don't know, Milo Yiannopoulos, freakazoids like that, these people are obviously not normal and are not to, be trusted in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. But the thing is, like, the way that he operates, again, seems at least logical to me from the standpoint of looking at him like a grifter or something like that. There's been nothing about Kanye's behavior that has said to me personally, oh yeah, this guy is definitely like consciously acting in his own self-interest. He's clearly been on this path of self-destruction that has gone so far and so beyond what I think anybody who was doing this performatively would logically do. My words as a leader in my community have real global impact and influence. In my mania, I lost complete sight of that. So, because again, a lot of what Kanye was saying was said with almost complete ignorance, the sorts of impacts it was having. I mean, with one of the most crazy and anti-Semitic things that he said off the bat when he first started going down that road, if you guys remember, like that same week, that's when those guys turned up on that bridge with that sign. When I was reacting to vultures originally, there were some serious freaks going crazy, absolutely apeshit in the comments, saying racist stuff, doxing me, going absolutely batshit insane. And it seemed like, and look, I couldn't have been the only, this is not a woe is me moment. I couldn't have been the only person who was dealing with that harassment. I couldn't have been the only person who was like, sort of going through those kinds of comments and those kinds of like, weird engagements. And it seemed like he just had no awareness of that whatsoever and just did not care and just didn't care whatsoever. So again, another very real statement in the midst of this apology here. As I find my new baseline and new center through an effective regime of medication, therapy, exercise, and clean living, I have newfound much needed clarity. I am pouring my energy into positive, meaningful art, music, clothing, design, and other new ideas to help the world. I'm not asking for sympathy or a free pass, though I aspire to earn your forgiveness. I write today simply to ask for your patience and understanding as I find my way home. Okay. All right. So that's the statement. I'm going to rate. I'm going to rate that apology pretty positively. There may be some elements of it where he's kind of like, explaining away or blaming his state on certain experiences and stuff that he, may not necessarily have all the facts, all the ducks in a row in order to like prove this is the reason I'm dealing with this and so on and so forth. But at the very least, he's he's taking accountability and he's putting it on himself to continue forward on the path that he's currently on. And he's not demanding forgiveness. He's not expecting it. And seemingly he understands that even after saying what he's saying here, he may not get the forgiveness that he seeks. And he understands that earning the forgiveness of people who he's hurt and who he's offended is not a complete task by virtue of just posting this. And it's going to be an ongoing process. He's going to have to be consistent. He's going to have to continue being on a positive path. He's going to have to continue not saying the kind of insane, extreme rhetoric that his name has become synonymous with over the past couple of years. He's going to have to avoid it. He's going to not only have to do that, but he's going to have to counteract it by, as he sort of insinuated down there, saying positive things, saying things that hopefully will have the opposite impact of the words that he's been saying, the extreme statements he's been spewing over the past few years. So, I mean, I don't know. Look, at the end of the day, like, apologizing is not a bad thing. Apologizing is an adult thing. I think we should do our best to sort of like leave space for people to get better, for people to change. Kanye has done a lot of damage. I'm not saying that you should feel any type of way differently about Kanye as a result of my statements, my reaction here, or his statements here. There are people who are well within their right to read this and be like, who fucking cares? I don't forgive this guy. And that's fine. You don't have to sort of like, force yourself to like what he's saying here or accept it. But, if he continues on a positive path, I feel like that's ultimately a good thing. Even if at the end of the day, like, there's still like a side eye there, there's still a bit of distrust there. The fact remains, Kanye still to this day, even after everything that has happened, he has a very large name and a very large platform. And it would be a net positive if from this point forward, he never had an outburst like what he's had in the past ever again, because that's less of an opportunity for some of the most impressionable among his fans to fall into ideological rabbit holes that they have no business falling into. That's less of an opportunity for extremists and conspiracists and bigots and professional hate mongers to use him as a vehicle to further push their platform and their ideology, which they were very much doing at the height of him being manic in the way that he has said. So, even if you never forgive Kanye again for the rest of your life, it's still a societal net positive. And you still should have some level of investment in him never going down this pathway again, because the more he embraces that rhetoric, the more it turns people onto that point of view, and the more it inflames that ideology, and the more that it makes people who in another context might just crazily think those thoughts to themselves. It makes them feel emboldened to put those thoughts out there into the world, because who's to say I'm wrong? This guy who's one of the biggest musicians, most successful people on the planet thinks I'm right. He's saying exactly what I think and what I feel. Why not put it out there? I wonder if he still supports Diddy. Look, if Kanye, and I presume this is the case, if not Kanye, but Ye, if Ye is in a position right now where he's actually taking heed of others' advice, which again, I think you would probably have to receive the input of others in order to put out this statement. I don't think he just like literally typed this out by hand and like, carefully edited it on his own. I think he had outside input on whether or not he would do this, and I think he had outside input on writing it himself. If he's accepting the outside input of others at this point, which it seems like he is, then I would hope whoever has his best interests at heart and is backing him up and supporting him and giving him perspective here is smart enough to tell him, hey man, maybe you have a strong opinion on Diddy, given history, given personal experiences, given your length of time in the hip hop industry, so on and so forth. But you shouldn't say anything. Honestly, you just shouldn't say anything. And most likely in the past, he's had a lot of those moments. He's probably had a lot of those moments in the past, and they were moments where maybe he did take the advice of those people. And there's clearly been a time, a period of years. I mean, obviously, he sort of like cites this 4-month period, but anybody who's really been following knows this has been going on a long time. There's most likely been a period of years where he's slowly been weeding out anybody who would tell him no and just refusing to listen to them. And, this statement to me at least says like there's got to be someone or some couple of people who he's willing to hear out at this point and say, okay, let me put out a statement, let me put out something that's going to hopefully put me back on a better path and announce to the world that I'm going to be more on the straight and narrow. I think it's not a solution, it's not a fix, it doesn't, amend everything, it doesn't fix all the hurt. It doesn't fix all the problems that he's caused over the past couple of years. But I think it does say something that, as performative as that last apology was with the rabbi in the video and so on and so forth, he hasn't fallen down that rabbit hole again since then. So I mean, that's like at least more consistency than we've seen for quite a while from him. And for him to, after all that time, follow that up with this, I think says something. Now, if you guys, are talking about trust and patterns from here into the future, I think we will just have to oh my God, pour me another, you're insane. I think we'll just have to sort of like see whether or not the craziness and the intensity, because, if he's going to continue to be a mainstream musician who thrives off of his music and his art and so on and so forth, he's going to have to, again, at some point, put himself back out there in the public eye. He's going to have to be back out there in the public eye once again. And he's going to have a microphone in his hand once again. And, he's going to have to show self-control in that moment. And there's not going to be another person there. Even if he is listening to advice now, there's not going to be another person there in that moment when he's on stage with probably hundreds of people filming him, performing in between songs, having the free choice to say whatever he feels like off the top of his head. In those moments, he's still going to have to exhibit incredible amounts of self-control to prevent himself from going back to where he just was. With that, I'm saying the real test of whether or not he is maybe not, genuine in what he's saying here, maybe I don't want to sort of like cast disingenuousness on it quite yet. But if he is truly being genuine and actually exhibiting self-control and trying to set a new path, like if he does do another album cycle very soon, that's going to be kind of the defining moment, because the pressure of that, the intensity of that, that's really going to define whether or not he could sort of like, prevent the ship from capsizing once again. Because, if in the middle of an album cycle, he just starts whipping into all of this once again because he feels empowered and he feels the intensity of all the attention, and, he feels like his platform is coming back and so on and so forth. In those moments, I'm sure when everything is quiet and he's completely isolated, while it's always a struggle, I mean, those moments when are going to be probably when it's easiest to sort of like keep his grip on reality, because you don't have all of those like intense competing voices and noise surrounding you, like distracting you or influencing you or impacting you in any way. When he's back out there in the thick of all of it, especially considering the fact that, if he does do another album cycle, there's going to be a lot of people reacting to it immediately, just being like, don't you still think this? Don't you still say that? Don't you do this other thing? Remember when you did all this other shit? I imagine sort of like dealing with all that is going to be difficult. You really have to sort of like counteract those moments and think like, everybody wants me to be this guy. I have to consciously decide to not be that guy and feed into people's worst expectations of me, which can, is like doubly a difficult task, especially when you're somebody who historically is as antagonistic as Kanye. He's almost seen like kind of a success over the years in his career by virtue of doing the sorts of things that people have told him not to do. You're a producer, you shouldn't be rapping. You're a rapper, you shouldn't be making electronic music or electronic fusions. You're, making pop and electronic friendly hip hop music. You shouldn't be singing. You shouldn't be doing pop songs. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing that. He has seen a lot of success going against the grain here and there, but this is like, Obviously a moment in time when that has blown up in his face in a super significant, super crazy way. Kanye has little to no self-control. He has to get his moral in place, thinking it isn't a matter of self-control. I don't doubt that there's an element of him genuinely thinking and feeling these things that he said in the past to some degree, because there are people who think all sorts of wild shit in the world, who are influenced by all sorts of like propaganda, false information, especially in the internet age. I mean, we're watching the biggest information platforms that we've all grown up with over the past 10 years, all become enshittified, all become subverted, all become algorithmically biased, all become just propaganda machines for either those who run them or for those who are willing to pay the most money. And the most impressionable and least educated among us and the most paranoid among us are being taken advantage of by those systems and by all of that misinformation. And that's not to say that, anybody who befalls that or falls into that should be immediately forgiven and just acting like it's not their fault and they had no control in it. No. But we should acknowledge the modern day reality that we're living in and sort of like looking at what Kanye has kind of like fallen into here as like a bit of a symptom of a larger problem that many people sadly are suffering through to some degree, either by virtue of being on the other end of those misinformation campaigns, or again, just falsely believing BS because you just don't know better and you don't have the information to better learn, because the pipes are being muddied right now. Not only in terms of, again, everything that I just described with what's happening with social media platforms, but also it's more and more difficult to get a hold of like good, effective information these days, even when you're going on search engines, just because of the way that like AI is just gunking up the tubes of everything that you're trying to find out about. Will I review his music now? It depends on whether or not he can sort of like keep his head together. It'll depend because, look, I've said that my commentary on his music is very much dependent on whether or not he is using his platform to destroy those who are less powerful than him. And it's predicated on whether or not he's using his platform to destroy anybody who would dare criticize him. To me, to be harassed by Nazis in his fan base, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. To sort of just like treat his music and treat his albums as if they're like, these completely neutral things that we can just sort of like engage in good faith with like no cognizance of the greater context that's happening around them. So again, very much looking forward to hopefully a more positive era from this guy. And once more, if you see anybody complaining in his comments about, the direction he's taking here, that's a good thing. That's a sign that these people are feeling like, oh man, I don't have this like, all the people who feel these things and endorse this ideology, they're all very like wimpy, scared, annoying, bigoted dickheads who don't have a mind and an opinion of their own. The only reason they feel the way that they do is because they feel emboldened by the fact that there are other freaks and morons and weirdos around them who feel the same way. And they only feel more justified in feeling this way and voicing these opinions because they see a guy the size of Kanye who is putting it out there and saying it. That's why, their social media figureheads and their propagandists are so important to them, because they sort of soften the world to their ideology and they soften the world to their propaganda because they're putting it out there over and over and over and over and over. I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you very much for watching, chilling, being awesome. I need to go do an interview, but in the meantime, click on this video over here, check it out. You're the best.